The crypto world is in shock tonight. A well-known investor and influencer, Konstantin Galish, has been found dead inside his Lamborghini, just hours after a historic market crash wiped billions off the charts. What really happened? Was it tragedy, pressure, or something darker behind the crypto collapse?
Welcome to Shocking True Crime. Thanks to all our viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay with us for daily updates on the most shocking true crime stories. Don't forget to subscribe.
October 10th, 2022. Kyiv, Ukraine. It was just another Saturday morning, or so it seemed. The world around him was waking up, while inside the cold walls of his mind, Konstantin Galish was sinking deeper into his own. The digital markets were in chaos, Bitcoin was plummeting, Ethereum losing ground, and the entire cryptocurrency world, once a symbol of freedom and wealth, was now unraveling at breakneck speed. The question was no longer, how high could it go, but how low could it fall? But as the market tumbled, so did something else, something more personal. And somewhere, deep in the heart of Kyiv, in a luxury car, a life was slipping away. A man, successful and ambitious, was found, his journey cut short. But was it a choice, or something far more complicated? In the moments that followed, the questions began to grow. What had really happened? Was it the end of a man overwhelmed by the weight of his own success, or was he simply caught in a storm he couldn't control? Was his death a tragic accident? Or was there something, someone, behind it all? We may never know the full story, but one thing is clear: Konstantin's final moments are a mystery that refuse to fade. And the truth is just out of reach. It was a Saturday morning, and the city was waking up to a world in chaos. The air was thick with tension, a heaviness hanging over the skyline as the morning light struggled to break through the haze. Thousands of people in the city were already gearing up for their weekend, some heading to work, others catching up with friends, but all unknowingly standing on the edge of a precipice. For the digital world, however, the day held a different kind of promise. The cryptocurrency market had just taken a massive hit. Bitcoin, Ethereum, the giants of this new financial age, were tumbling, plummeting by over 12% in just a few hours. The shockwaves from this crash reached across the globe, wiping billions from investors' portfolios worldwide. What had been a booming industry, promising immense wealth to many, was now unraveling before their very eyes. But what happened next, no one could have predicted. And then, amidst the devastation of a global financial downturn, a luxury car, a Lamborghini, was found, its engine still running, a soft hum filling the empty streets. Inside, a man slumped in the passenger seat. The blood was hard to ignore, staining the upholstery, a deep crimson against the white leather. A gunshot wound to the head. The man? Konstantin Galish. A name that had been on the rise, a name that many in the cryptocurrency world knew well. He was known as a prominent figure, a crypto entrepreneur with a massive following, a rising star in the digital asset space. But the story wasn't as simple as it seemed. Konstantin Galish, also known as Kostya, had been a man on the move, an influential figure in the cryptocurrency community. His life was seemingly flawless, built on the back of his success as an entrepreneur and co-founder of the Cryptology Key Trading Academy. He was a man who knew how to captivate an audience, how to make them believe in the digital dream, to inspire them to invest, to trade, to follow his lead. But behind the sharp suits and the polished smile was a man fighting battles of his own. A man whose story, tragically, was about to take a dark turn. In the hours leading up to this moment, Kostya had been in a downward spiral. The global market crash hadn't been kind to him, and he had let his family know. On the eve of his death, Konstantin sent a heartbreaking message. One that spoke of his depression, his financial troubles, and his overwhelming sense of failure. It was a message that now echoed louder than the sound of the engine that had once powered his rise to fame. A soft, almost imperceptible hum of a cell phone vibrating, hinting at the message that had been sent. The chilling silence that follows adds weight to the tragedy. He had sent his family a farewell message, a desperate cry for help, wrapped in sorrow. In it, He spoke of being lost, of the unbearable weight of his financial troubles, and of the personal demons that had chased him to the very edge. A man who had once stood tall in the world of crypto, now found himself broken, overwhelmed by his own success and the collapse of the very market he had championed. His family didn't know it yet, but this would be the last message they'd receive from him. Less than 24 hours later, Konstantin was gone. Found dead in a Lamborghini in the heart of Kiev. The question now wasn't just about his life, it was about his death. Was this a suicide? Or was something far darker at play? Konstantin Galish's death was as perplexing as it was tragic. The details, the circumstances, none of it fit. He was a man who had everything to live for, a man who, just a year earlier, was seen as the future of cryptocurrency. And yet, in that Lamborghini, with a gunshot wound to his head, it seemed as if the world had suddenly turned its back on him. Was it the weight of his own choices? Was it the pressure of an unforgiving market? Or, was it someone else entirely? What really happened to Konstantin Galish? Was he a victim of his own success? Or was there something more behind his death? Could the very world he had helped create, the high-stakes, volatile world of cryptocurrency, have played a part in his downfall? Or was he simply another casualty in the ruthless game he had chosen to play? As the investigation begins, one thing is certain, the answers are far from clear. And as we peel back the layers of Konstantin's life, we may uncover something that shocks us all. Konstantin Galish, known to many as Kostya, a name that echoed through the world of cryptocurrency. By 32, he was a rising star in the digital asset space. A self-made entrepreneur who had co-founded the Cryptology Key Trading Academy, one of the largest digital asset trading education platforms in Ukraine. His expertise in Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other cryptocurrencies had earned him a massive following online. To his followers, he was the embodiment of success, the kind of person they could look up to, the kind of person they aspired to become. But success wasn't always in the cards for Kostya. Born in a small town in Ukraine, he came from modest beginnings. His father had passed away when he was just a boy, and his mother, a resilient woman, worked tirelessly to raise him on her own. They didn't have much, sometimes, it was hard just to make ends meet. But Kostya, even as a young boy, had big dreams. He didn't want to be another victim of poverty. He didn't want his future to be dictated by what he lacked, but by what he could build. His mother instilled in him a strong work ethic and the belief that anything was possible with hard work. But no matter how much they struggled, no matter how many setbacks they faced, Kostya had one constant drive: he wanted more. The hunger for success, the desire to prove himself, became his fuel. He excelled in school, pushed himself further than most around him, and eventually found his way into the world of technology and finance, two things that would change his life forever. It wasn't an easy journey, though. Despite his intelligence and ambition, Kostya didn't always have the right support. He didn't come from a network of wealthy investors or powerful business connections. He had to build everything from scratch. It was a struggle, a constant battle between his dreams and the reality of his circumstances. But his relentless pursuit of success brought him to the booming world of cryptocurrency. The timing was perfect. By the time he co-founded Cryptology Key Trading Academy, Kostya had become a well-known name in the crypto community. His academy was an instant hit, offering education to thousands of aspiring traders. He made a fortune teaching others how to navigate the volatile world of Bitcoin and Ethereum. His social media platforms were filled with motivational posts, showcasing his luxury lifestyle, expensive cars, trips around the world, and flashy events. To the world, Kostya was the embodiment of financial freedom, living proof that the crypto world could deliver everything it promised. But behind the flashy lifestyle and the social media fame, Kostya was hiding something. Despite all of his success, his life was far from perfect. His constant drive for more had come at a cost. The pressure to keep up the image of a perfect life was taking its toll. He had built a following, yes, but he had also built an expectation, one that weighed heavily on him. The pressure to always be successful, to always appear happy, became a prison of its own. The truth was, Kostya was struggling. Kostya's family recalls moments of doubt, times when the money he was making didn't seem to ease his struggles. They remember him talking about feeling empty, about how the wealth and the followers didn't fill the void that had been there for years. No matter how many new cars he bought, how many flashy Instagram posts he made, the pressure never let up. In private, he would admit that the lifestyle was suffocating, that the financial freedom he once dreamed of now felt like a burden. Even as he shared success stories with his followers, Kostya was fighting his own demons. His family remembers him talking about depression, about financial anxiety despite his wealth. In some of his most vulnerable moments, he confessed how uncertain he felt about his place in the world. He had everything that so many people dreamed of, yet he felt lost. And in the weeks leading up to his death, those feelings became harder to ignore. As much as Kostya preached financial freedom, as much as he encouraged others to take control of their lives, he was struggling with the very things he spoke so confidently about. The volatility of the cryptocurrency market, the constant pressure to stay ahead, and the emotional toll it was taking on him all collided in ways that no one could have predicted. It was a perfect storm that would soon have devastating consequences. Perhaps, in some ways, Kostya had always been running from something, his past, his insecurities, or maybe the weight of expectations he could never fully escape. His success, while impressive, had never come with the peace of mind he so desperately needed. And as the cryptocurrency market faced its most significant crash, a crash that would wipe out billions from the portfolios of people just like him, Kostya found himself spiraling. His message to his family that night was a desperate cry for help, a final warning that things had gone too far. In that message, he spoke about his depression, about how his finances were crumbling, how the weight of it all was too much to bear. A man who had once promised freedom, who had once been the face of success in the crypto world, now found himself trapped by the very system he had built his life around. The dream he had fought so hard to create had become a nightmare. Cryptocurrency had been a revolution for many, an escape from traditional finance. For some, it was the dream of a life unchained from the old systems. For others, it was a high-stakes gamble, a way to make fortunes in a world that moved faster than anything they had ever known. Konstantin Galish had been one of the lucky ones, an early believer, an influencer who rode the wave to fame and fortune. His rise in the crypto world had been meteoric, a shining example of what was possible in this unregulated, volatile market. But in a world driven by highs and lows, there was always one certainty: what goes up must come down. Galish's prominence coincided with a fever pitch in the market. Bitcoin surged to unprecedented highs, Ethereum followed suit, and everything seemed to be moving in one direction, up. But with every peak, there's always a danger of a fall. And fall, it did. It wasn't just a dip, it was a collapse. On October 8, 2022, a series of events sent shockwaves through the market, setting the stage for what would become a catastrophic crash. It was a Saturday like any other when the bottom fell out of the cryptocurrency market. The catalyst? A tweet, one from an unexpected source, Donald Trump. In his usual controversial style, Trump's announcement about tariffs set off a chain reaction. Bitcoin, which had been riding high, plunged by 12% in a matter of hours. Ethereum, the second largest digital asset, followed suit, and soon, the entire market was in freefall. It wasn't just Bitcoin, it was every major token, every major coin. In just a few hours, $19 billion in investor wealth evaporated. For someone like Kostya, who had built his entire brand on the very market that was now in freefall, it was more than just a financial loss. The very foundation of his empire was crumbling, bit by bit, with every drop in the market. What had once been a symbol of financial freedom was now a battlefield of loss and uncertainty. For the first time, Kostya had to ask himself, was his success just a fleeting moment, a flash in the pan? Was the empire he had built with so much effort and ambition on the verge of crumbling? The emotional toll was more than just the loss of money. It was an existential crisis, one that reached far beyond the numbers on a screen. Kostya had positioned himself as the embodiment of crypto's promise: freedom, independence, wealth without the constraints of traditional finance. Now, he was staring at the collapse of the very dream he had sold to thousands of followers. What did this mean for him? For his future? For the future of his academy? It was as if the ground beneath him had shifted, and he was now teetering on the edge of a precipice. In the days following the crash, Kostya became a different person. The lively, confident man who had once spoken with such certainty about the crypto market now seemed distant, withdrawn. His posts grew less frequent, his messages colder. To his followers, the man who had once preached about financial freedom and seizing the moment was now silent, retreating into himself as the market continued to spiral downward. It wasn't just about the money. It was the fear of losing everything. His reputation, his influence, the empire he had worked so hard to build, all of it was now in jeopardy. As the market plummeted, so did the number of followers, the number of students signing up for his academy. The future that once seemed so certain now appeared as fragile as glass. With each passing day, the weight of the financial pressure began to consume him, and the smile he had once so effortlessly worn became a distant memory. Behind the scenes, those who were close to him began to notice the change. His friends, his family, even his colleagues at the academy, all saw it: the man who had been so full of life, now a shadow of his former self. He was no longer the confident leader who had once seemed untouchable. The constant pressure was beginning to break him, and the self-doubt he had once kept hidden was now bubbling to the surface. The same digital world that had made him rich was now closing in on him, and the man who had once inspired so many was now searching for answers that no one could give him. As the days passed, the weight of the world seemed to grow heavier for Konstantin Galish. The promise of a thriving future that once shone so brightly had dimmed, leaving only shadows. Every morning, it felt like he was sinking deeper into a darkness he couldn't escape. The man who had once dazzled his followers with success, hope, and confidence now felt like a stranger to himself. On the eve of his death, as the world continued to turn, Kostya sent a final message to his family. A message that would later send chills down the spine of those who read it. Those words, simple yet heavy with despair, were the final cry for help from a man who had once seemed invincible. Kostya spoke of his loss, of his inability to maintain the life he had so carefully built. He spoke of depression, of feeling crushed by the weight of financial collapse, and of the suffocating pressure that seemed to consume him from every side. It wasn't just the numbers, the falling stock prices, the dwindling cryptocurrency values, it was the crushing loneliness. The deep, gnawing feeling that he had no way out.
Welcome to Shocking True Crime. Thanks to all our viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay with us for daily updates on the most shocking true crime stories. Don't forget to subscribe.
His family, heartbroken and terrified by the message, tried desperately to reach out to him. Calls were made, texts sent, nothing could bring him back. The man who had inspired so many, who had once stood at the forefront of the crypto revolution, was now a shadow of himself. No one could have known that, just hours after sending that final message, Konstantin Galish would be found dead in a luxury car in Kiev. Hours later, as the world carried on unaware, a passerby stumbled upon a luxury car parked in the Obolonsky district of Kiev. The sleek Lamborghini sat abandoned, its engine still idling in the still night. It seemed out of place, sitting alone on a quiet street, the only movement the faint flicker of a street lamp above. The passerby approached cautiously, only to find the door slightly ajar. Inside, the body of Konstantin Galish lay slumped in the passenger seat. His life had been cut short, his dreams shattered. A gunshot wound to the head, the final blow in a life that had seemed full of promise. And beside him, a weapon registered to his name. It wasn't just the brutality of the death, it was the way it all unfolded, quiet, alone, in a city that had no idea what had just occurred. The questions began immediately: was it suicide? Was it something darker? The police arrived, and the investigation began, but answers weren't easy to come by. The gun, legally registered to Konstantin, was found next to him, but there were no signs of struggle, no indication that this was anything other than what it appeared to be, a man who had reached the breaking point. Still, something didn't sit right. The circumstances were too neat, too perfect. There was no sign of foul play, no indication of someone else being involved. But how could a man who had once stood so tall, so confident in his success, come to this? Had he really taken his own life? Or had someone else pushed him over the edge? Was it the relentless pressure of the market? The weight of his debts? Or was there another hand, lurking in the background, orchestrating a tragedy that no one could have foreseen? His death left more questions than answers. Was this the final act of a man who had been broken by his own success? Or was it something more? Was Konstantin Galish truly a victim of his circumstances, or was there a darker force at play, waiting for the right moment to strike? As the investigation continues, the truth of what happened to Konstantin Galish remains unclear. But one thing is certain, his tragic death was more than just the end of a man's life. It was the end of a story that had captivated so many, and the beginning of a mystery that may never be solved. Was it the inevitable result of a life lived in the high-stakes world of cryptocurrency? Or was Konstantin Galish's death part of a much larger, more dangerous game? The scene was chaotic, but the investigation was methodical. When the police arrived at the scene in the Obolonsky district of Kiev, the first impression was that it was a clear-cut case. A man, alone in his car, his life taken by his own hand. The gun next to Konstantin Galish was legally registered to him, leaving little room for suspicion of foul play. But there was something about the way the scene unfolded that didn't sit right. Why was he found dead in a luxury vehicle, alone, with no one around to confirm the events? Why would a successful entrepreneur, known for his optimism and flair, take his own life? The question echoed in every investigator's mind. At first glance, it seemed simple, a man who had reached his breaking point, crushed by his own financial failure. But the more the police dug into the details, the more discrepancies they found. There were no signs of forced entry into the car, no signs of a struggle. The car itself, pristine and untouched, suggested a different story, one that didn't fit the standard narrative of a man choosing to end his life. Every detail was scrutinized. Was this really a suicide, or was there more to the story than met the eye? Kiev police worked tirelessly to connect the dots. They examined every angle, every piece of evidence, trying to piece together a timeline. Was it possible that Konstantin had staged his own death? Or had someone played a part in the grim scene? The fact that there was no sign of struggle made it all the more puzzling. How could a man who had so much to live for, who had seemed in control of his life, end up dead in a car with no one else around? The deeper they looked, the more the questions began to mount. As the investigation progressed, a breakthrough came, not in the form of new evidence at the scene, but from a deep dive into Konstantin's personal life. What the police uncovered shocked everyone. Alongside the messages Konstantin had sent to his family, the ones filled with despair and regret, they found something even more troubling, signs of mounting debt, financial trouble he had tried desperately to hide. He had been borrowing money, pledging his future earnings, and relying on loans to maintain the image of success he had carefully crafted. But behind closed doors, the walls were closing in on him. Documents, invoices, and overdue bills painted a picture of a man drowning in financial pressure. Despite his outward success, the money he had made from cryptocurrency trading, his academy, and his social media ventures was being eaten away by debts he had been unable to repay. The market crash had only made matters worse. It wasn't just the digital assets he had lost, it was the trust of those who had invested in his vision. Friends, family, and followers had placed their faith in him, and now he was faced with a harsh reality. Could the financial pressure have been too much for him to bear? Was the pressure of his mounting debt so great that Konstantin saw no way out but death? Or, more disturbingly, was he silenced by someone who stood to gain from his downfall? Had someone with a vested interest in his failure pushed him to the edge, ensuring that the financial empire he had built came crashing down? As the investigators sifted through Konstantin's financial records, the possibility of foul play became more than just a theory, it became a legitimate question. One thing was clear, Konstantin's life had been more complicated than it appeared. Beneath the flashy lifestyle, the Lamborghini, the social media fame, and the success stories, there was a man struggling to keep it all together. A man fighting to maintain his image, even as the weight of his financial failures and personal doubts became too much to bear. But the question remained, was this the tragic end of a man who had simply cracked under the pressure? Or was there someone else involved, someone who saw his downfall as an opportunity? As the investigation deepened, the detectives began to follow a new trail, one that led them into the world of those closest to Konstantin. Was there a rival crypto investor who had something to gain from his failure? Did a business partner stand to benefit from his ruin? Or was Konstantin simply the victim of a system that devoured him whole? The investigation was just beginning, but it was clear that this was no ordinary case. The truth was out there, but it would take more than just digging through documents to uncover it. Konstantin's family, devastated by his loss, began to speak out. In the wake of his death, they were left to process not only the tragic end of a beloved family member, but also the stark realization that they had never truly known the full extent of his struggles. They shared stories of the man they loved, a man who was kind and generous, someone who always tried to lift others up. But behind the kindness, behind the smile, there was a side of Konstantin that they never saw, the side weighed down by the instability of his online persona and the unrelenting pressure of the cryptocurrency market. His family had witnessed the rise of a man who became a symbol of success, but they were blindsided by the depths of despair he had been hiding. They spoke of late-night calls, those conversations where Konstantin's voice would crack with the optimism of someone who was determined to keep moving forward, even when everything around him seemed to be falling apart. They remembered him talking about the future, about the bright possibilities, the plans he had for himself and his academy. But those conversations were never one-sided. There were moments when the mask would slip, when the carefully constructed facade of success would falter, revealing the deep cracks beneath. The family had no idea how deep Kostya's troubles really went. To them, he was always the strong one, the one who had made it, who had found success when others had given up. But in the quiet corners of his life, he was struggling. His family never saw the sleepless nights, the anxiety that gnawed at him, or the way he tried to mask his despair behind his social media posts. He had become a figure of inspiration for thousands, but in private, he was battling with the overwhelming fear that everything he had worked for could slip through his fingers at any moment. His final message to his family made it painfully clear, he saw no way forward. In those last words, he expressed the depth of his hopelessness, the crushing weight of financial strain, and the emotional toll of trying to keep up appearances. For those who had been closest to him, it was an agonizing revelation. They had no idea how much he had been hiding, how much of himself he had kept locked away. The message felt like a final confession, a cry for help that came too late. The family recalled moments of joy, too, memories of Konstantin's laughter, of his generosity, of how he would drop everything to help someone in need. He was a man who genuinely cared about the people around him, who offered advice, comfort, and support without hesitation. They painted a picture of a person who, despite his outward success, never forgot where he came from. A son, a brother, a friend who would do anything to make others smile. But as they remembered these moments, they were forced to reconcile them with the painful truth, that Kostya had been fighting a battle they knew nothing about. The depth of their loss wasn't just about the man who had passed, it was about the realization that they had never truly understood what was going on behind the scenes. The man who had been the rock for so many was now gone, and all they were left with were memories, unanswered questions, and the haunting feeling of, if only they had known. As the family tried to make sense of the tragedy, they were left with more questions than answers. Was there a way they could have helped him? Could they have seen the signs, noticed the cracks in his perfect life? Could the family have been there for him in a way that might have changed the outcome? These were the haunting questions that played over and over in their minds, questions that had no answers.
Welcome to Shocking True Crime. Thanks to all our viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay with us for daily updates on the most shocking true crime stories. Don't forget to subscribe.
Konstantin's death marked the end of a life that had once seemed so full of promise, but it also marked the beginning of a long and painful journey for his family, one filled with grief, guilt, and the weight of knowing that they may never fully understand why Kostya made the choices he did. They were left to pick up the pieces, trying to piece together the man they had known, and the man he had become in the final days of his life. What had once been an inspiring story of success had now turned into a heartbreaking tale of personal struggle, one that would stay with them forever. As news of Konstantin Galish's death spread, so did the speculation. What had once seemed like a straightforward case, of a man defeated by his own struggles, quickly spiraled into a web of questions that no one seemed able to answer. Was this the tragic end of a desperate man, finally reaching the breaking point? Or was there something more to this story? As the investigation into Konstantin's death continued, some suggested that Kostya might have been the victim of something much larger than personal despair, perhaps the victim of a deep conspiracy within the very crypto world he had helped to build. An empire, once booming with possibilities, crumbling under the weight of manipulation, greed, and betrayal. At the heart of this theory was the idea that Konstantin had become entangled in something far darker than a financial crisis. The cryptocurrency market, notorious for its volatility and lack of regulation, was also home to people willing to do anything to protect their interests, ruthless individuals who wouldn't hesitate to take drastic measures. Could Konstantin, with his meteoric rise in the digital asset world, have made enemies who saw him as a threat to their own empires? Was his death the result of an unseen hand, pulling the strings from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike? Others pointed to the very nature of the cryptocurrency market itself. Konstantin had made his fortune by riding the waves of Bitcoin and Ethereum's unpredictable rise. But what goes up must come down, and the volatility that made crypto so profitable also made it dangerous. Did someone with deep knowledge of the market have a hand in pushing it towards collapse, knowing that Kostya's financial stability would crumble alongside it? Could the crash in October, which wiped billions from investors' portfolios, have been engineered by unseen players with the ability to manipulate the market's movements? And, more importantly, did Konstantin become one of their casualties? The idea that Konstantin's death was a result of crypto market manipulation wasn't just an idle theory. Some suggested that he may have been targeted by those who saw him as a potential obstacle, someone too influential to be allowed to keep rising. Others pointed to his outspoken nature, his high profile in the crypto world, and his growing influence. In a market where power and money were always shifting, did Kostya's success make him a target for those who saw him as a threat to their own power? Was his sudden downfall orchestrated by people who knew how to play the game behind the scenes? But then there were other questions, darker and more personal. Could someone close to Kostya have been involved in his death? Was there a personal vendetta, someone he had betrayed, someone who felt they had been wronged? Could a business partner, a colleague, or even someone from his inner circle have played a part in silencing him? In the world of high-stakes trading, trust was often in short supply. Friendships were forged and broken just as quickly as the rise and fall of a cryptocurrency. Was Kostya a victim of betrayal, not by the market, but by someone he trusted? We may never know the true cause of Konstantin Galish's death. The investigation into his tragic end has uncovered more questions than answers, leaving behind a trail of theories, suspicions, and dark possibilities. Was his death truly a suicide, the result of personal despair and mounting pressure? Or was he the victim of a more sinister force, an elaborate scheme set into motion by those who saw him as expendable? The truth remains elusive, slipping further away with each passing day, as those closest to Kostya grapple with the loss of a man they never truly understood. One thing remains certain, though: Konstantin Galish's death raised more questions than it answered. Was he a victim of his own success? A man overwhelmed by the very system that had made him rich? Or was he simply caught in the crossfire of a much larger, more dangerous game, one that no one could see coming until it was too late? As the investigation continues, the truth seems to slip further out of reach, leaving us with only the haunting possibility that Konstantin's death was part of something far darker than any of us could imagine. The music fades into an eerie silence, leaving only the distant sound of footsteps echoing in the dark, a final, haunting note to the mystery that remains unresolved. In the end, Konstantin Galish's death was a tragic reminder of the high price of success in the volatile world of cryptocurrency. A life lost too soon, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. Was it a suicide, the result of a man pushed to his breaking point by the crushing weight of his financial troubles? Or was there something darker at play? Did Konstantin's rise in the digital asset world, filled with ambition and success, lead him down a path from which he could not return? The idea that Konstantin's death was a result of crypto market manipulation wasn't just an idle theory. Some suggested that he may have been targeted by those who saw him as a potential obstacle, someone too influential to be allowed to keep rising. Others pointed to his outspoken nature, his high profile in the crypto world, and his growing influence. In a market where power and money were always shifting, did Kostya's success make him a target for those who saw him as a threat to their own power? Was his sudden downfall orchestrated by people who knew how to play the game behind the scenes? But then there were other questions, darker and more personal. Could someone close to Kostya have been involved in his death? Was there a personal vendetta, someone he had betrayed, someone who felt they had been wronged? Could a business partner, a colleague, or even someone from his inner circle have played a part in silencing him? In the world of high-stakes trading, trust was often in short supply. Friendships were forged and broken just as quickly as the rise and fall of a cryptocurrency. Was Kostya a victim of betrayal, not by the market, but by someone he trusted? We may never know the true cause of Konstantin Galish's death. The investigation into his tragic end has uncovered more questions than answers, leaving behind a trail of theories, suspicions, and dark possibilities. Was his death truly a suicide, the result of personal despair and mounting pressure? Or was he the victim of a more sinister force, an elaborate scheme set into motion by those who saw him as expendable? The truth remains elusive, slipping further away with each passing day, as those closest to Kostya grapple with the loss of a man they never truly understood. One thing remains certain, though: Konstantin Galish's death raised more questions than it answered. Was he a victim of his own success? A man overwhelmed by the very system that had made him rich? Or was he simply caught in the crossfire of a much larger, more dangerous game, one that no one could see coming until it was too late? As the investigation continues, the truth seems to slip further out of reach, leaving us with only the haunting possibility that Konstantin's death was part of something far darker than any of us could imagine. In the end, Konstantin Galish's death was a tragic reminder of the high price of success in the volatile world of cryptocurrency. A life lost too soon, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. Was it a suicide, the result of a man pushed to his breaking point by the crushing weight of his financial troubles? Or was there something darker at play? Did Konstantin's rise in the digital asset world, filled with ambition and success, lead him down a path from which he could not return? Konstantin Galish remains a mystery. Konstantin was a man who had everything to live for, at least, that's how it appeared to the world. He had risen from humble beginnings to become a symbol of success in the cryptocurrency world, a beacon for others who dreamed of achieving what he had. His story was one of triumph, of overcoming obstacles, and of creating something from nothing. Yet, behind the digital persona, there was a man deeply troubled by the very system that had allowed him to rise. The same cryptocurrency market that had promised financial freedom became his prison, and the pressures he faced proved too much for him to bear. Was Konstantin's tragic end the inevitable result of a life spent navigating a high-risk world? Or was he the victim of something more sinister, someone or something that drove him to his final moment? The unanswered questions swirl around his death, leaving a cloud of doubt hanging over every piece of evidence. Was he a victim of his own ambition, a man consumed by the very success he had worked so hard to achieve? Or was he caught in a much darker game, one that involved more than just financial loss? As we reflect on the life of Konstantin Galish, we are left with the uncomfortable truth that success, particularly in the cutthroat world of cryptocurrency, comes at a high cost. The world that Konstantin had helped shape, with its promises of untold riches and freedom, has also revealed its darker side. A side filled with manipulation, hidden agendas, and an ever-present threat to those who rise to the top. Konstantin's death serves as a stark reminder that no one is immune to the pressures of the world they inhabit. Even the brightest stars can fall when the weight of their success becomes too heavy to bear. As the investigation into Konstantin's death continues, we may never uncover all the answers. His life, his success, and his tragic end remain shrouded in mystery. One thing is certain, though: Konstantin Galish's story will continue to resonate, both as a cautionary tale and as a haunting reminder of the fragility of success. We may never know the full truth, but his death will remain a mystery that lingers in the minds of those who followed his rise, and ultimately, his fall. What do you think happened to Konstantin Galish? Was he a victim of his own ambition, driven to the edge by the very system he had helped to create? Or was he caught in something far more dangerous, manipulated, betrayed, or silenced by forces far beyond his control?